This man has written 32 top 40 hits, 24 top 10s, and 14 number ones. Played with Ringo and the Roundheads with our old buddy Mark Hudson, and he has a great new book out called Reunion. Please welcome Gary Burr.
Thank you. Woo-woo, indeed.
I love talking songwriting with great songwriters.
Really? What time is one showing up?
And I just said to Gary before, whenever he's on the show, and literally all the time, there's like 10 or 12 emails. Hey, Ken, does Gary know, or whoever it is, do you know when you've written a hit song?
No. I've written 14 number one songs, and I don't think I ever finished a song and said, this is a hit. and I recognize that I've done good work and that I've written a good song. Sometimes even I've written a great song, but I have a giant closet full of songs that I think are great songs. After I write it, so many people have to do things just right. Dominoes have to fall. The person that I play it for at my company has to love it. He's got to play it for somebody at the record label, and that somebody has to have had a really good breakfast or, a really good cup of coffee, be in a good mood, and hear the song, and then the artist has to listen to it. It's all these things have to fall into place for a song to be a hit. Once I do my job, there's a whole bunch of other people that have to do their job before a song's a hit.
It's an amazing collaboration, and I'm sure there were great songs that had the wrong artist or the wrong tempo or the wrong whatever, and it didn't connect for some reason. But
yeah, it drives you crazy thinking about that. You can't think that way.
You can't. It would drive you nuts.
Cross your fingers and put it out there into the world.
It always worked. Tin Pan Alley. There were a bunch of songwriters, the Brill Building in New York City or wherever you were. You wrote songs, you handed them out, and then they would sort of give them to other musicians and give them to producers to make. And that was the way that went. My favorite, Carole King told the story that she and Jerry Goffin, they'd lock them in the room and they had to make 4 songs a day.
Yeah.
You know the story.
Absolutely.
Right? Verse, chorus, then second song, reverse it, put the chorus, and then they have lunch, come back, and then turn the page upside down. And you had to write one song and try to do it 4 ways.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that, but not much. That's how it's done down in Nashville where I live. It's, every building that you see has offices in it and has songwriters trying to write songs, and in the next room, you're trying not to listen to those people writing their song.
Really? But you hear it.
You can't help but hear it, so you gotta write really quietly so they don't steal your good ideas.
And then here come these 4 kids from Liverpool. No musical training whatsoever, never, not to play an instrument, no writing things, and they start like every band doing covers, and it turns out these 2 strangers, this 16-year-old kid named John Lennon meets his 14-year-old kid Paul, who then 2 years later brings his 14-year-old friend in, and they turned out to be some of the greatest songwriting combinations that ever lived, if not the best.
It was pretty amazing the way it progressed. They started out writing very simple, and then as they got, I always liken it to building a house. What you got to do first is you got to just learn how to build a nice simple house. You got to learn how to write a nice simple song, and you do it over and over and over, and you write 100 of those until you can write a nice simple song in your sleep. Then you say, oh, maybe I can maybe I can build a house that's got a second floor. And then you work on building a bigger song and a better song, and you do 100 of those until then it's time to try the next thing. And before you know it, you're writing more complicated, more complex, more artistic songs.
It's amazing that, we always talked about it, we mentioned it before, about the Beatles being the first band that ever evolved musically. Everybody just stayed in their lane. Paul Anka, a great songwriter, sang and wrote Paul Anka songs. Everybody did. You were the chanteuse, you were the bebop guys. They go from She Loves You, Yeah, 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 to Tomorrow Never Knows in 2 years.
And what's amazing is one of the leaps that I always was conscious of is back in Tin Pan days, everyone was writing, I love you, you love me. Suddenly the Beatles wrote, She Loves You. third person. And it's like, that's weird. And all of a sudden it says, oh, we don't have to just write first person or second person songs. And even something as simple as that really opened the floodgates.
And you've got this sort of teacher in George Martin working with them. It's one of my of all the George production and playing and arranging. I mean, as they're running down Help, and the song begins with, when I was young, so much younger than today, and he runs it down, and George says, what if we put the chorus first? What? And the song just starts cold? Help? Yeah. It jumped, I mean, the speaker practically jumps out of the radio when we were kids when we heard that.
Well, I was talking to one of the older songwriters in town, a guy who wrote The Dark Side of the Street and old R&B classics like that. And he wasn't getting anything cut. And he was getting really frustrated about it. And so he realized that the people he was playing the songs for were turning it off after like halfway through the first verse. So he said, from now on, I'm starting every song I write with the title. And he did that, and now he's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame, and every song, it starts with the title. I'm Your Puppet, songs like that. Those are the songs he wrote. And it's as simple as that. Help, start with the chorus. She Loves You, start with the title. And it's pretty amazing how often that is dumb, but it works.
Have you ever tried that?
Nah. No, I like being poor. Of course I've tried that. Ever since I had that conversation with him, that's all I'm doing is writing songs with the title
Really?
first. Sure.
If it works, it works. Why buck the system?
I'll learn from the best.
I got to say one of my favorite songwriters, not named John Paul or George, Jimmy Webb, who's wonderful. And I said,
brilliant.
One of my favorite examples of songwriting, I mean, Wichita lineman is just incredible. And I said, I'm a lineman for the county. I work the main road, searching in the sun for another overload, beautiful lines. And I said, I always thought 1,000 songwriters, the next verse would be, and there's a girl back in Dayton, and there's this, and Betty is, and you start, the next line is, I hear you singing in the wires. Perfect, because I get it. We know, we got it. It's a girl and the thing and you're alone. Like, you don't have to give me, and she's wearing a gingham dress and I told her I'd be back. I got it.
Well, that's the trick in songwriting is you want to tell it without telling it. Yeah.
And you can't really go to school. Here's the other question. Is it something you learn, or can you study it? Or is it the 10,000 hours, like you said, 100 of these, 100 of those?
It's both. A lot of times, a lot of the biggest songs that I've written, I'm really happy with it, really happy. And then there's a line in it that even I look at and go, I don't know where that came from. I remember writing all those lines, but that line just showed up. So when people come to me and say, oh, you know that song that Tim McGraw recorded? There's a line in that, blah, 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 blah. What made you think of that? And I go, that's the line in the song that when I wrote it, I went, holy shit.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of the antenna and a little bit of the lightning hitting the antenna that you hope happens. And I'll bet you if you look at all the most successful songs, there's one of those spark lines in there that make the song elevated from another good song to one of the great songs.
Donovan, who's here, said, was there jealousy in the days about John and Paul writing all these? Because it wasn't jealousy so much; it was just stupefaction. I have 5 songs people might remember. Eric Clapton has 20. What did they do in a previous life to get hundreds? Who gets? Did they dab our Savior's wounds? Why did they get hundreds? These two, and fast forward. He told the story on the air, the late Jimmy Buffett, who's brilliant, wonderful, one of the sweetest men ever. And he was good friends with McCartney. They're out in the Hamptons, and they're a barbecue kind of thing, or,
As you do.
As the Hamptons crowd, Bon Jovi and Paul and Jimmy Buffett. And they're hanging, and says, Paul's at one end of the table with my wife, with Sarah, and I'm at the other end talking with friends, and Paul's wife comes over to sit by me. And she comes over and she stumbles a little bit, almost falls. And I sort of caught her. I said, "You okay?" And she said, "Yeah, it's just my gummy kicked in." And he said, "My gummy kicked in. What a great idea for a song." He goes, and I just said at that level. Down the table, 20 people. "Hey, Jim, what's going on down there?" So I'm just thinking about a song. Paul comes down. "Hey, did you say you're writing a song?" And he goes, and I said to him, "For the love of God, will you let one go by? Will you let one song go by you so I could have one? Just let, well, tell me," she said, "My gummy kicked in. It's not a Paul song. That's a Jimmy song. Would you let one go?" And Paul said, "Hey, can I play bass on it?"
Nice.
Yeah, no, as he said, "No, I got a guy." Yeah. But it's amazing how, the antennas were so strong for those guys.
Yeah, I always say that songwriters observe the world differently. They watch movies different, they read books different, they have conversations different. There's a part of their brain that is always listening for that one turn of phrase that's a little different, or that one emotional situation that you can store away. I have a friend of mine who told me that he was having a fight with his wife, and she was right up in his face and arguing, and she said something to him, and he just looked at her and said, "I know you're mad, but will you just hold that thought, because I got to write down what you just said." And he ran out or wrote it down and came back and goes, "Okay, keep going."
Because it was there.
And it was a #1 song.
That's his perfect. Imagine.
Yeah. You remember the song, "I Want to Divorce You"? That was no, I'm kidding.
Imagine walking down the street and you pass the window of an antique store, and there's an antique poster for Pablo Franchi's circus, and it says, "Being for the benefit of Mr. Kite." And you look at it, to this end, I need to buy that. And basically you write a song from the poster.
Yeah.
Don't change a word.
No, that's brilliant. Back then, they were just pulling it out of anywhere you can. The hardest thing about being a songwriter is, especially when you become a professional songwriter, is when you're a kid, you can see a unicorn and, okay, I'm going to write a song, and then you can wait until you see another unicorn. But when you become a professional songwriter, you're expected to see a unicorn every day at 10 o'clock in the morning. So sometimes it's the craziest thing of what you're going to write, and you just have to come up with something. One day I just thought, I'm going to write a song with the words jumbo shrimp in it, and just to see if I could. And I wrote a song, and Leanne Rimes recorded it, and it was a big hit with jumbo shrimp in it.
So, which is A, amazing, but B, is there a pressure? Is there a Tim McGraw or a Leanne Rimes or producer going, "Hey, Gary, need a song. Any chance you can get me something?"
There used to be, when I first moved to town back in the 1700s, there used to be, this many songwriters, this many artists. Every day they were calling around going, "What have you got? What's new? What have you got? What can you send us? We really need to fill out an album." Now there's this many artists, there's this many songwriters, and all the artists have discovered that they want to be songwriters too. So it's a lot harder to get on the records, and so there's not that much of coming and knocking on the door and saying, "Do you have anything new?" It's a lot more aggressive. We have to be really aggressive and climb up on Reba's window and knock on a window at 3 in the morning.
But even with your track record, 14 #1s, 24 top 10s, 32 top 40s, with all that, they don't come to you sort of first and go,
well, if you run into them, you're well known enough so that if I run into an artist, which is the fun thing about Nashville, you can run into artists, and when you run into them, they will say, "Hey man, because at this point, there's not many people I haven't written for,
right?
So they'll know my work, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm getting ready to do a record. Do you have anything special that you can send me?" So there's a little bit of that. I'm certainly I don't carry tapes in my pockets, but with the internet, before I drive out of the parking lot, they have my song in their inbox.
which is amazing. Quick story about writing for someone. Again, it goes back to Jimmy Webb. He told me the story that he was going, Richard Harris takes him to Hollywood Bowl to see Sinatra. And Sinatra always, name checks everybody in the audience, this star, that star. He goes, great Richard Harris got this kooky song about a cake in the rain. The kid who's with him, Jimmy Webb, he wrote, hey, Jimmy, stand up. Write me a #1 song about a cake in the rain, will you? Okay, everybody laughs. We go backstage, Mr. Sinatra, he goes, well, you're going to write me a song? And Jimmy said, you mean it? He goes, did I stutter? Yes, sir. He goes, so I went home. I had to pour myself a bottle of scotch. He goes, and how do you write for Sinatra? He goes, you know what? I love these songs where he doesn't get the girl. I love his happy, but the 2:45 songs.
Yeah.
And he just starts, he's drinking it all night and finds, this time we almost made a go of it, didn't we? And it's just coming and it's coming. And by the morning, I feel like I got something. I work on it the next day. And I tell my agent, and he says, they say, call this number. And I call this number, hi, we're told you have a song. He says, yes, where do I send the cassette? Mr. Sinatra does not listen to cassettes. Here's his address. He wants you to play it for him.
Nice.
Like, Jesus. Okay, so he drives, he dresses, he gets in his car, drives to Beverly Hills, is waiting for like Cheech and Tony. No bodyguards, no security, no lock. You open the gate, you just walk in. And the only security in Frank Sinatra's Beverly Hills house was an index card taped over above the bell that said, you better have a pretty good fucking reason to ring this bell.
Nice.
He said, oh, I got a good reason, but do I have a pretty good... I'll take my shot. He goes in, walks in, would you like a drink? Yes, sir. Piano's in there. Yes, sir. Mr. Sinatra will be along. Hi, Mr. Play it. Plays him the song. Sinatra walks out of the room. Okay. Goes home. Mr. Sinatra will be recording your song. And he goes, and that was my only, never, great job, or nothing. It was just, okay.
Wow.
That's a little cold.
Yeah, Nashville used to be like that. You used to be able to walk in a studio. You used to know where somebody was recording, and if you had a song, you could walk into the studio, sit in the lobby, and the break would happen, and they'd come out of the studio, and you go, if you got a second, I got a song for you. And they would sit, you could play them the song on the guitar, and they would go, okay, and they would bring it in, teach it to the guys, and record it. But that was a good 30 years ago.
If you want more about songwriting, I'm telling you, it's so much fun. Monday night at the Cutting Room, our home away from home, 32nd and Park. It's so much fun, Gary, with him doing the stage, because you're playing live and explaining all this in this writer's circle, how it goes. Now, to the book, Reunion. It's wonderful. I absolutely loved it.
Thank you.
Because it's written from an insider's point of view, from what a musician would be. You know the stories, you know the personalities, you know the writing. And the point is, if it had happened, if it could have happened, how could it have happened? What series of events could have made it happen? Which is amazing. And we find out there was this tape, and this only came out, a couple of years ago. Mark Lewison found it. They recorded that last meeting at Apple because Ringo wasn't there. So they recorded it so Ringo could have a tape of the meeting. And they're listening back to Abbey Road, and John says, no, this isn't AI. John says, all right, I think, the next album, George should have 4 songs, not just 2. The next album? You've left, you're with Yoko, it's done, we've seen and in this meeting, this is after, Get Back and Let It Be. On the next album, he said that.
Yeah, for people that I may be a stranger to them. I've been working with Ringo since like 2000, and he told me once. He said in the late 70s, the 4 of us were talking about getting back together and doing something, and the holdout was surprisingly George. But Ringo said we really thought he was starting to weaken and come around. We didn't know what we were going to do, but we were going to do something. And then 1980 happened, and that went away. And that's basically what my book is about. It's just the idea that a fluke thing. John stays in the studio for an extra playback of a cut. So when he comes home, he misses his assassin. They never meet. And that makes for a whole new timeline, a whole new world where all 4 Beatles are still on the planet. And 18 years later, when Linda McCartney passes away, he's so bereft that his daughters are worried about him, and they suggest, put on a benefit concert against breast cancer. And he said, well, who do you think I could get to play? And he goes, you don't have to ask, just ask the right 3 people. So he picks up the phone, and after all that time, he calls the other 3 Beatles. And the trick is, when you think about it, what would that look like? How do you even tell the world that there's going to be a Beatle reunion? There's no Walter Cronkite. How do you tell the whole world? And where do you rehearse something like that to try to keep it a secret until you know that it's going to work? Because they've all still got a lot of knives in their backs from back when they worked together, and they have to see if they can remember that they used to love each other and not just all the resentment. So I just wrote this story about whether or not they can pull off this big benefit concert where all 4 Beatles, and what do you do? Do you do just Beatles songs? So no Imagine, no My Sweet Lord? You know, it's all these things. I've been in the studio with them, and do they remember the songs? It was really fun to write.
What was Ringo's, when Ringo said we were talking about it, and I'm sure the blood like rushed out of your head as you're trying to be cool. Was he wistful about it? Could you see he was like kind of coulda, mighta?
Yeah, I don't know if it was wistful. It was sort of, you know, it was a little, you know, the fate sucks kind of a thing, you know? Yeah. You know, but yeah, that would have been something. That would have been amazing.
I mean, like you said, I mean, John always said, look, if you tell us we do one concert and we will definitely cure cancer, that this amount of money will cure cancer, he goes, great. We'll rehearse, we'll play in the Grand Canyon, the whole world will come, we'll do the concert, and it's done. But in a way, as ridiculous as it is, how do you do it? And that's that's just as he's a great songwriter, and you're imagining stories in people, you imagine the possibility of this, and that's what I love so much about Reunion, because it's in really detail of how it could happen.
Yeah, you know, to have them in the studio rehearsing, and George hasn't even touched a guitar in 10 years, so he doesn't have any calluses on his fingers. And little things like that of, you know...
He doesn't remember where he left his guitar.
Yeah. Well, because he lives in a place that has 150 closets.
Right.
I don't remember where I leave mine sometimes, and I only have 2 closets.
But, you know, it's that thing of George. If there was anyone, I think it would be George, because he was the one who was mistreated the worst. I mean, from the movie, we didn't even give him any bandages. You know, they know what they did to this kid. They don't have songs. It's coming apart, and George goes, I've got this song, I've got that song. And they're going, that's nice. What? Yeah. I've got 5 songs. Yeah, good. And, you know, like, I understand why I'll see you around the clubs.
Yeah, that's what the attitude in the book is for him. It's like, why should I?
Heartache? Yeah.
Why should I? And then, you know, the appeal to the, you know, because we used to be friends, because we used to be the best band in the world. Don't you want to see if we're still the best band in the world?
Almost every band I've interviewed, not, I mean, on the surface, but people I've come to know, every single one has said, the great times were pushing the van out of the snowbank, trying to get to the college to play the gig. That's when we were friends. That's when we were fun.
When Ringo tells the stories, he doesn't tell stories about being in fancy hotel rooms or being in jets. He tells the story of the van when the front windshield smashed out and it was freezing and they were piled up on each other just, you know, for warmth, just praying that nobody would fart.
Right.
And those were the stories that he loves to tell. He's never telling stories about, you know, hanging out with Mick Jagger or something like. He's talking about some awful dressing room that they were in and what John did. You know, it's been tremendous. It's to be a fly on the wall for all that.
Magical times. Roger Hodgson from Supertramp, and you know, this Breakfast in America. It's a crime of the century. Some great songs, great albums. And we talked about this thing, and he said, we're just this weird band, but I had some great songs, and Rick had some songs, and I said, and I knew it was over. I said, when did you know it was over? He said, we had 4 sold-out shows at Madison Square Garden. And I'm sitting in the green room, and I look around, and I realize we all have a guy, a person. I've got my manager. He's got a lawyer. And I went, the band's over. We're not talking to each other. I'm talking to my guy. He's talking. We're not talking about the football match or whatever, how we always did. I went, yeah, it's...
Did you ever hear the Paul Simon story?
No.
Someone asked him, when did you know Simon and Garfunkel was over? And he said, we were playing in Rome in this beautiful amphitheater, and he was in the middle of playing the boxer. And while he was playing the boxer and singing, he remembers he was looking up going, I wonder how much those apartments go for. And that's when he said, we're done. I am not engaged in this, so this has to be over. I wonder how much that apartment goes for. It's amazing what you can do while you're singing a song and your brain splits in half and you're thinking, after dinner, we're going to get pizza, but what kind of pizza? And you're still playing the chord changes.
Billy Joel said the exact same thing. He said the break, I'm loving it and appreciating it now, because I will tell you that 20 years ago, I was in the middle of playing and you guys are screaming. I'm thinking, I hope they have shrimp on the menu on the in-room service. That would be nice.
Yeah, but then you go through that to the other side where you're totally appreciative of getting the chance to just entertain people, and the people like what you do, and you're a part of their lives, and you want to bring that to them, and you want to put a smile on their face, and you want them to remember where they were when they heard that song on the radio for the first time.
It really does matter. And by the way, I loved the work that you and Mark Hudson did. Ringo and the Roundheads was great music. Those are great albums.
Those were some great records. We had Ringo Rama and Choose Love and all those records. A lot of work over in England, and a lot of fun, a lot of great stories. We stayed in a cottage on his grounds of his big estate. I'll tell you a couple of quick stories. We were in the studio, and he was reading a paper, and there was a picture of back in the 60s, him and George at the Peppermint Lounge. And he's looking, and I'm next to him, and he nudges me, and he shows that picture. And he goes, if you had told me 50 years ago that I was still going to have to talk about this stuff, I would have never done it. And then he kind of leaned back and he looked out at his magnificent estate. And he leaned back over and goes, yeah, I would have.
Because, it's a double-edged sword. You're in this maelstrom, like George said, that, man, how great. We gave our nervous system to it. It can destroy. Fame destroys people. Think of all the great young musicians, the Horrible 27 Club. Fame and fortune come too soon. You have no tools to handle it. And it's destroyed some of the most talented people we ever know, or it's ruined, and it's certainly ruined friendships and ruined things. That's easy. Another friend said, every time he's asked on a solo tour, you think you guys will ever get back together? You think? And he said, my stock answer is always, you never know. He said, but the real question is, how the hell did we stay together so long?
Yeah.
That's the hard. You can't explain that part, because once we hit, we weren't friends anymore. Which sucks. And so many people have told me there's a jazz trio, my friend Jackie Naylor in San Francisco, four-piece. She's wonderful, great songs. And she said, we are great. The guys are playing for beers, hoping to hook up. I'm just trying to build something. We got a record deal. And the minute we got the deal, it all changed like the weather, like that. Suddenly, it's like, hey, Jackie, if you remember, I wrote the middle part of that, really, let's be honest, I should. He goes, we never had that conversation once until some money came in. And I said, turned to our music director, Art, and said, what's going to happen now? He goes, we have to let them go. I'm like, what? He goes, we're done. I'm like, oh, that's so sad, Gary.
Yeah.
But you've seen it.
The struggle bonds you, the success drives you apart.
Think about that. Beautiful. Gary Burr, the book Reunion. You absolutely want to read
I'll be right outside there at a table with the books. Come say hi, and I'll tell you more about it. Thank you very much.
You're going to play tonight, right?
Yep, we're going to play tonight. Going to play, Simon's going to play, and awesome. Yep, we're going to have some fun.
And I'll see you at the Cutting Room Monday night. Gary
Monday
Burr.
night. Thank you.